hello, and welcome to the Rebel Road. I'm excited to have my dear friend and guest, Dr. Stephen Hairfield, on. He's been on a previous episode, and so if you missed that one, definitely take a look. He is the American monk and the author of The Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible, and just is a vast, sweeping volume of knowledge and wisdom, and I just adore speaking with him. So I am thrilled to have you back, Stephen, and ready to dive into all the different places that our hearts end up taking us in deep, deep conversation today.
Well, you know, it's often been said by me to people, if you follow your heart, you'll probably find your dreams.
That is the truth. That is the truth. And I know that one place that I wanted to start today was around the word presence. I think there's a lot going on in the world that possibly would make people want to turn away or be apathetic or feel like they don't have the ability to truly make a difference, to truly take a stand, to truly take in sometimes all of the heartbreak and the hurt and the pain and the challenge that we see on the outside. And so I want to really talk about the importance of presence and where it has to begin. And I'd love to hear your take on that.
Well, that's a great subject, Simran. In monastic teachings, they're all about presence and being present. The essence of being present, and it's a simple thing to do, but you'll find it the most difficult thing to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And that is to always keep your mind and your thoughts right behind your eyes. When your mind is right behind your eyes, then you are present. And being present, it gives us the idea of presence. We don't need to invent a time machine because we have one. We're always bringing our past into the present, and for the most part, we're always looking towards the future. Well, the logical mind won't trust anything it cannot understand, and the future is one of those things that it cannot understand. We can only understand the past, but if we stay out of the past and out of the future, then you have that presence. And by the way, you suggested something. I have a little bit of a different take on the world. I think the world is doing precisely what it is supposed to be doing. The conflicts, the shootings, the taking of things from humanity. And I think we're being shown what we have become, and that's an unpresent society.
Yes.
And
yes.
that creates the conflict. Go ahead.
And I agree with you. I think that the world is doing exactly what the world needs to do for us to recalibrate. And yet there's so many people, I think, that have difficulty in reconciling many of the things that are taking place. And I believe it is because of the lack of presence within themselves that is mirroring the very emotion or experience or pain and devastation that is on the outside. And if that's the one message that I can bring through the Rebel Road is how to really take all of that that's out there and do the work inside with our own humanity, that's really the true place that we affect outer humanity.
Absolutely. Gandhi said it best when he said, be the change you wish to see in the world. If we want to be that change, and by the way, a lot of ancient texts say that it only takes one person to change the world. Hitler did it, throwing him in there. Christ did it. Buddha did it. Martin Luther King did it. So all it takes is one. In David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, he says that one present enlightened human can affect 1 million different people. So if we were to all become present, then it would change. There's something that I really, Simran, would love if people really understood. The human is the most sacred temple in existence. Now imagine what this world would be like if everybody realized how sacred we are, and when we looked at each other, we saw sacred creatures. How much conflict could ever be in that? None.
There can't be. There can't be. But yet we've not been taught from an early time, you know, between cultures and religions and society and media. There's not much out there that really places the sacredness on this vessel.
Mm-hmm.
It makes our gods everything that is other beings or money or celebrity or the next addiction that we can fall into. Those become the sacred, the idols, rather than what the true sacred and the true essence and idol should be. And so to really change that perspective from that place of presence and starting with being with the mind behind the eyes to be present, how do we become present to the truly divine sacred that's in? What did you learn in all your years as a monk and in your years afterward that really helped you to stay in that place of sacredness?
Well, when one realizes their true sacredness, they're going to only do that through presence anyway. We are probably the best gift to our own self. And, you know, we've just been indoctrinated all of our lives into a divisive mind. And we don't realize that it doesn't have to be. A divided mind, Christ said it the best. When he said a house divided, it cannot stand. But even if you look at the idea of all of those religions, they teach divisiveness. Education teaches divisiveness. Governments teach divisiveness. And that keeps people divided from within. And when I learned, and it took me over 3 years in a monastery to learn to keep my eyes 100% or my mind 100% right behind my eyes. And then when I came back to the corporate world and to the States, I found that to be passively challenged, but managed to keep it. And it's worth it. And any human can do it. Any human. We're talking about presence. If people learn to realize too that their life experiences are simply attempting to guide them to their own presence, even look at everything that Simran has gone through, and look how you came out the other side. And when you look back, you cannot say it was a lot of fun during.
It never is a lot of fun during it, but
No.
yet at the end, if truly present and if truly taking the gift that those experiences bring, then you even see the sacredness in those. You see that every single moment, every single experience, every single step is that holy walk back to the self.
Perfect. Perfectly stated. Because it is that holy walk. And if we learn to honor ourselves in our experience, it changes. You know, there's something I realized not too long ago, Simran, and that's that when we ask ourselves, why am I experiencing this or that? I can guarantee you 2 things are going to happen without question. And 100% of the time. The first, when you ask why, you're going to engage your logic, which is going to take you out of presence and being in the present. And the second thing I can guarantee you is whatever you're experiencing has to continue until the logical mind gets that answer, because just as soon as it gets that answer, it quits. So don't ask why, ask what am I being shown about me here, and take your focus off of anything outside you. Even if we look at the state of the world today, there's been more pleasant times, but when you look at the world today, you could say it's an upheaval, or you could say it's being taught not to do what we're doing to each other. So if we look at it that way, that also now has the opportunity of bringing the sacred idea of humanity into our reality. And with that, we would be totally present.
Yes, I want to go to what you said and repeat it because I think it was such a powerful statement. So when we look at the thought of placing the mind behind the eyes, and we're looking at, or something is going on in the outer world, whether it is to us or something being shown to us, if our head goes outside and starts to analyze it, then all of a sudden the mind has left the eyes. And what you said is to look at it. So if we stay behind the eyes where we are witnessing and we are just looking at what is being experienced, then all of a sudden we're very present to hear, as opposed to having our energy completely left our body and moving into the experience outside. And that to me sounds very much like being in the world, but not of it.
Perfectly stated. Because if you're, what it's basic, that whole concept of being in the world but not of it is just being free of any attachments. We attach to things. When we look at the conflicts going on in the world and we think, oh, how horrible, you just attach to it. Just as soon as you said that is the first thing. Second thing, you also judged it, which blocks you from seeing what really is going on with individual humanity. Humanity is literally being taught that this anger and rage accomplishes zero. It never has, but we just haven't gotten that point yet because we would rather condemn it and judge it. And that solves nothing. But being that one enlightened present human, just think there's what, 6 billion people on this planet?
Right.
Which means we need 600 million, I guess, I hope the number is right. We need 600 million enlightened people to affect the rest of it, and then it would change. And that's a simple, nonviolent way to do it. I mean, after all, Gandhi got his country back without ever firing a shot.
That's so true.
We don't need that, and it never solves anything. As according to the theory of the 100 monkeys, without going through it, have you ever heard that?
I have, yes.
Okay. All right. We can be influenced like those monkeys in either direction. We can be overpowered by conflict, which now puts the whole world in conflict, or you can stay anchored in your presence, which is going to give you peace, and then you can help counterbalance that. It's a very simple thing to do. And like my teacher said to me, nothing is easy, but everything can be simple. So if we break it down to the simplest of terms, let's face it, you are a sacred being. I am a sacred being. And anybody that listens to this show is hopefully can realize that. You know, we all, people, and this is a misnomer, but in this journey of consciousness, which really isn't, there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to look for. There's nothing to find. And you went through that, right?
Oh, absolutely. We become these seekers, seeking something that when there's nothing really to seek in the first place.
No, it's just realizing it, and there's a real difference. Because realization, being self-realized, means just that. You recognize the divine. I'd love everybody to look at it from this way. According to the Christ, when asked where the kingdom of heaven was, here's what he said. You look here outwardly, and you look there outwardly, but the kingdom is within you.
Yes.
Now, if this creator is in heaven and heaven is within you, then that's right where it sits, which makes it you and I and every other human. All it takes is the realization of that. We are so special. Simran, a rose can't be a petunia. A cat cannot be a dog, not that it would want to. And a pear tree can't be an apple tree. But us humans, we can be anything that we so choose by how we see our own selves. And if you are present right behind your eyes, you will see the truth of you, and you will know that there's nothing to find because it's already there. Just be present with it.
You said something very powerful right from the beginning, and I want to bring it back to this conversation about sight. And it was that one person can change the world. And you stated Jesus was that one person that truly affected the world. And Hitler was that one person. And so that shows that it really isn't about the positive or negative. It is the sight with which we're seeing and the lens that we are moving forward on, and how that is infecting as a virus all the people around them. And a virus isn't a bad thing. It is what travels through everyone else. I think the issue in the moment is, number one, we're not seeing through clear lenses. We're not even looking through the eyes. We're looking through almost a projection of other people's filters rather than our own. And so there is this almost walking blind that is taking place. And maybe that's the numbness. Maybe that is the inability to really see what's there because of one's own pain. But I also want to move into the deafness that exists, because there is a level of an inability for people to hear or know their own sacred specialness, or to hear, see, and know what's taking place outside and where their steps are to take in regard to that. So let's move from seeing also now into hearing and deafness.
Well, you know, how in the world can we hear our own self within the den of our own mind? One of the biggest things Tibetans are known for is training the mind, and the mind is very trainable. I think what really, and I'm going to seem to diverge, but not really, we have an interesting take on the ego, and I have found that I think we're looking at it inappropriately. The ego can be a person's best friend. The ego can be our greatest teacher if we learn to watch it, to see what it wants to tempt us with. And through those temptations in that ego, we have become deaf because we've been focused on the outer world and what's going on out there. And then we honestly believe we have to identify everything. So how can an eternal soul, what's it going to gain by identifying everything? It already knows what it is. And it allows it to be what it is. And the soul in every human is crying out to be heard. I think it was Annie Besant. She said it the best. The divine voice is that still, small voice within, which surpasses all understanding. And if we listen to that little whisper through the deafness of our own mind, we'll speak to our soul as she speaks to us. But it's because of that numbness that we've experienced. And I think a lot of it has its basis in how we see our pasts. And here's the funny thing. The attachment to the past is just an attachment through our emotions. We remember the emotion, which keeps us hesitant in today's moment. But see, when you're present, that past is totally irrelevant. I can look at all of my past, from the difficult childhood into combat in Vietnam, and I see all of it clearly, but I have no attachment to it, none. So that no longer can deafen me in today's reality. So if we learn to stay, you can't forget your past, no.
Right.
But it's the emotional value that you give to it, which keeps us stuck to it. It numbs us and creates that deafness to where listening to the soul, for a lot of people, not that they cannot, is almost absurd because it's not obvious. It's like the sense of intuition. It's shared by me with many people that intuition and logic will absolutely never agree. And logic is going to talk you out of what your intuition or inner tuition, inner learning, inner knowledge is telling you. And we all have that. The soul sees everything, but not only can it not get you to hear, it cannot even get us to see it as it is. Because we have to see everything as we're conditioned through the judgmental state of our own mind.
Well, and I think that's the place, because if we are seeing from the mind, that is being blinded. We have clear sight when we see through the heart. And I believe that the deafness that occurs, when we look at someone that has pulled out a gun and shot another person, they are in that moment, they're deaf to their heart.
Oh, yes.
They're hearing their head.
Yes.
And so if we can deafen the voice of the mind and listen more clearly to the heart, I don't think as many of those things would be taking place, because
No.
it's that aspect of it that is I think people are so quick to listen to their logic, to listen to their head, that they're not tapping in or not allowing the full presence of their true beingness to come through. And the head is just the computer. It is just the recorder. It is mostly something that just gives you back something that you've already taken in or processed in a certain way. It's not going to truly bring you any new knowledge that I know of.
Mm-mm. Everything that's known is known. And in fact, we can know the universe if we aligned with the universe, and then we don't even have to read a book to tell us what's out there or how to do it. The mind, to myself, in the original intention, is like a steering wheel to a vehicle. It's to steer the power of our being, which is our heart. Our heart is the engine, and it's up to the mind to steer it where the heart wants to go. But because we've become deafened to our own emotions, I'm not sure people really know what they feel anymore.
Mm.
And we're talking about deaf in hearing, and now deaf in emotions, and blind. Wow, people, what are we doing? It doesn't have to be done that way. We actually are like the natural world, except we've separated ourselves from it. All creatures, bugs, doesn't matter, they use awareness because they don't think.
Mm.
We're the only living thing that can think. That's the reason earlier it was shared that we are self-determining. That we determine that direction. We determine the life that we choose. Are we choosing all of this stuff now? A good percentage is yes, but the greater percentage, I'm going to say no. That's not something. I mean, for me to even think about picking up a gun and shooting at a human would be absolutely absurd, because my mind does not go there. It is possible, Simran, and meditation is a key, to quiet the mind so the mind, it doesn't have to think. Once heard it said that the average human thinks at 2,500 thoughts a minute.
Mm.
I think I run 2 to 5 maybe. And those are only about, wow, what are those ants doing? You know, but why burn up anyone's energy? And when you have that kind of an idle mind, you're present. You're not deaf. You're aware of everything. You see things as they unfold in present time. I mean, it's always a pleasure to me to be driving on the highway, knowing what the car in front of me is going to do. And then just, if they're going to come over into my lane, I just slow down. And sure enough, they come over, because aware, observant comes through presence.
The eyes are a little bit wider. When we have less thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
the vision is actually broader. We see a greater periphery.
Mm-hmm.
And all around us. We hear to a greater sensitivity. We tap into a degree of senses that is beyond our sense ability. And
I like how you said that.
and that takes us into that bridge between human and God's walking. That is the merging of those two spaces, rather than that dualistic place of I'm here, human, weak victim, me, lowly me, that can't do anything, has no power, and there's something else that is controlling everything in my destiny and everything that can happen. And, you know, perhaps one day something will happen in my life, granted by that being that is so far beyond me. But there's a bridge that has to happen. There's a bridge, and that's, again, we go back to seeing. It is recognition. It is awareness.
Being a little humorous here, is that a bridge to nowhere? Well, no. The whole idea, all right, we say human. That word automatically creates the illusion of separation.
Mm-hmm.
Separation from divine, when what we are is a being. If we allow ourselves to be a being, then we'll see a totally different dynamic about ourselves. Besides, human is kind of limiting, and being isn't
Yes.
at all. And we aren't being, we are operating human right now. And that's the lowest vibrating idea in the almost in the entire universe. I don't know if you knew this, but I had a scientist tell me there's only one wavelength difference between a human and a piece of granite.
Wow.
And I thought, whoa, that's not, but that's because we're so dense at heaviness is the intention. But the funny thing is that's a choice.
Hmm.
If we want to open our ears, let those with ears hear. It's a simple statement. That would open our eyes to the truth, and that would allow our emotions to be into our presence and our being. And then we would just simply have awareness with not much to think about. It's simple, but why stay caught in the distractions when we don't have to? It's a choice that any of us can make at any given time. You didn't just wake up one morning and found yourself in the space where you are. On one hand, you had a journey of the physical to get you to the space where you are now. And then one morning you did wake up and it was there. And you did one thing. You didn't walk across the bridge. You just realized that you were okay and that you are no ego intended. You were on a special theological journey
Mm-hmm.
of yourself. Now you realize that it was all worth it. And even if you look at yourself today, be willing to say that I don't think too much out there in the world disturbs you now.
No, there's not really. I think when you've walked the darkest paths,
Mm-hmm.
you realize there's nothing. There's no boogeyman. There
No,
really is no boogeyman that's going to jump out. It's just the same path as the light path, and they actually
yep.
meet at the end of the two. So it's
Some
really,
symbol of yin and yang.
yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
In-
And that's part of our journeys. You cannot get rid of the dark or the light. We have to allow for both and stay in the middle, like Buddha said.
yes. Yes, on my walk today, I was actually walking down the middle of the highway. I found myself walking the yellow line. I thought, well, isn't that an interesting metaphor and mirror that I've just done on my own without realizing?
That's
So
pretty brave.
presently unpresent.
That's pretty brave. Down the middle of the road. Fortunately, there were no automobiles on it
It
at the
was
same time.
completely clear. But isn't that kind of a message in itself that when we
Totally.
do walk the middle line and we walk so grounded and so
Mm-hmm.
centered,
Mm-hmm.
then every obstacle clears from that
And
path for you, and it is wide open.
what are obstacles anyway? Aren't they teachers?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So it all depends on how we see the obstacle. And if we, so to speak, and if we're present with it, all of the aspects of the obstacle we would see and we would understand, which would mean it would be no obstacle. Like Lob Singh said to me one day, he said, sometimes it's best just to go ahead and climb the mountain.
Mm.
And that's what obstacles are. It's something there. It can affect us whichever way that we choose, because it is our choice. My suggestion always has been just use the Zen of poo and go, oh, bother, and do it anyway. Because, well, it's there. You can't avoid it. So may as well just grin and bear it.
Well, I have found that every obstacle or challenge that has appeared has only appeared so that I can reveal to myself the lie. And that, if we're seeking truth, if truth is the ultimate goal for every person's journey,
Mm-hmm.
then if we just simply started looking for the lies, the truth is naturally there.
Mhm.
It appears on its own. But
It'll
I
be the
think
opposite.
it'll be the opposite.
Mhm.
And right now, I think there's so much of the world where, because of the deafness and the blindness and
Mhm.
the clinging to the lies or the masks, that the truth can't reveal itself. It's not that the truth is shrouded, it's that we are shrouded, and the truth is waiting around us
Mhm.
outside for us to remove the veil that we've covered ourselves in.
If you live a lie, how will you ever see the truth?
Mm.
And we've been taught to live an illusion. So, but the truth is there, and there's no question of that. You know, when we look, talking about the world, when we look through the appropriate awareness using our heart, everyone is being shown the truth. A guy by the name of Arthur Schopenhauer made this statement in 1475. The truth always goes through three stages. Three. And here they are. At first, truth is resisted. Secondly, it's argued and fought against. And then thirdly, it's realized as obvious. So when you look at the world, which stage would you say it's in? Wouldn't it be stage two?
I was going to say obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
it's
Okay.
obvious.
Cool. That means there's only one more step to go. And the only question on that one is, how long are they going to be arguing about the truth and fighting about the idea of truth? That's only an element of when, not if, that the entire world will get to the third stage. It will. Because even if you look at your own self, truth stares you in the face, you have an experience and you resist it. Okay, you're in step one, and then you want to create an obstacle with it and you struggle with it. Now you're in step two, and then you go, oh, here's the plug. I was talking about with a headset. Um, so we do that internally as well as externally. So it's as though we humans, before we get to really understand ourselves, are going to have to go through those same three stages until we realize the truth is we're all sacred ground. And we
Yes.
don't have to be blind. We don't have to be deaf. We don't have to be numb to our own emotions. And you can look at any human and you can see what stage they're in.
I
If they're,
think it all boils down to personal will. That the majority of people are living through personal will. And
Mhm.
personal will is simply the will of the person, the identity that someone has identified with. And if you've identified with the smallness of an identity, then you can't possibly see divine will. And divine will, it would be everything outside of the identity. That the personal identity is the very veil that is keeping us from the unknown that is so much bigger than we are as the person. And I know that as an individual, that for a lot of my life, it was personal will that pushed me through everything,
Mhm.
rather than just the obvious of allowing the obvious of what's there. And that's a big obstacle for a lot of people, because we've been taught that you got to push, you got to do, you got to strive, you have to be ambitious, you have to
Mhm.
attain. And that's all egoic, more personal attainments rather than something bigger.
Look how synchronistic your life has become. Okay, that's following divine flow. That's just following the natural flow of you. We could even say in a seemingly chaotic world, and I don't mean that literally. Um, so synchronicity is one of the things that humans can look for. And as long as things are synchronistic, and oh, by the way, audience, don't say to yourself, this is too good to be true, because if you say it's too good to be true, it's going to stop.
That's
So,
right.
so we don't want that. So when we go through all of these seeming struggles, look what you end up with. The real self, free of attachments, allowing life to flow, fighting with nothing, arguing with very little, and just living. That's true life.
Mm.
And being deaf to oneself, you will be deaf to the world. If you're blind to your own self, then you will not see what's really going on. You will allow your eyes to see what your mind thinks, but you won't see what is really there.
That is so true.
Absolutely. And when we accomplish the task of keeping the mind right behind the eyes, you will be present. I had a lady in Oklahoma working with that idea, and she sent me an email too long ago, and she says, Stephen, I can make it a minute and a half. And I just typed back, I said, good. Colleen, now go for 2 minutes. You do it a minute at a time until that mind, the din and noise of the mind, quiets. In fact, the Tibetans have a saying, when you hear the roar of silence, you have consciousness. And it can be, and any human can do it. It doesn't take us out of the world. It doesn't create laziness. In fact, it creates givingness and also the ability to receive, which once again is balance.
What I've also discovered, Stephen, is when we allow ourselves that place as opposed to how we have been trained in the world, all of a sudden the choices, the movements in one's life will be the things that are truly heartfelt, that truly bring fulfillment to the self rather than what we think we have to do. And I think that's one of the big lies, is a lot of people are doing things and they've convinced themselves that they love what they do or that they're doing it for a really good reason, but everything in their life is showing that it's out of alignment.
When you're blind, you're not going to see it, especially if you're blind to yourself. Why would you acknowledge that? You know, again, you are correct. We've been conditioned to be humans, and we're so much more than that. I totally feel that we are infinite creatures if we choose that. We were talking about identities earlier. What do you think would happen if everybody identified themselves as a divine being? Wouldn't they have to become that?
They would have to become it.
And then all I have to realize after that is it just changes. They have a saying in India that before you're enlightened, you chop wood and carry water. After you're enlightened,
you chop wood and carry
water. And the difference is only before it was work and now you're doing something.
Yes.
Which we still, in the idea of consciousness and enlightenment, we still have a three-dimensional world to operate in. We just operate in it differently. That's all.
And that doesn't mean taking on a different persona that just says, I'm not going to be that negative person. I'm going to be all love and light. And I'm going to, light my incense, and I'm going to, wave my feathers, and I'm going to, do all of these things, because even that can be another mask, or even the way of doing business. There's the obvious, very masculine kind of, and when I say masculine, it's that very pushy, agenda-oriented type of way of doing business or acting in the world. And then there's this kind of manipulative trick that a lot of people utilize that really is the same thing. It's just flowered up. Mm-hmm. And we can't replace one lie for another lie. We have to eventually say, what's the truly divine way of doing this? What is true being? And can I trust enough? What has to crack from around me to trust enough to even let go of shrouding it in something that's just prettier looking, but not really any different than the other?
What a person is doing when they are doing all of that is they are treating it as an external thing. Where was your ceremony in all of this? I mean, I don't know about you, but there was no ceremony. There was no celebration. It's just like, oh, okay, this can be done differently. And I was considering something, and I don't mean anything derogatory about this at all. I was at a wedding. It was at a Catholic church, and I was sitting there watching all of this ceremony, but the priest that was doing it looked, well, he was lying to himself. There was just movement, nothing sacred about it. And when we light candles and burn incense and move our feathers around, that's all external stuff. Why don't we do that internally? Because that's where it really takes place. To myself, very few people truly accept themselves. You haven't always accepted Simran. I certainly have not always accepted myself. But today, one day it just kind of hit me. What difference does it make whether I accept myself or not? Because if I don't, it's going to stay the same. But if I do, well, we'll see. It's a different path. And then in that moment, I didn't see anything inappropriate or incorrect about me. And there was no more self-judgment involved because I'm just me. I cannot be a peacock. I was going to say I cannot be a female, but Caitlin did all right, I guess. So even that's possible. But I know you understand what I mean, and I hope that the listening audience does as well.
Well, what I get from that too, that I really want to make a point of, is there's a lot of talk about forgiveness. And I believe forgiveness is an amazingly beautiful practice, and that is a path that someone can get to ultimately for that acceptance that you talk about. But if we just simply go into acceptance, forgiveness becomes obsolete. It's not even necessary. And so if we can, we have a way to shorten the journey. We have ways to not stretch out the struggle. It's the determining factor is either we really love playing in that field of shadow and light to that degree, or we have decided, okay, now I want to up my game and play more in this spectrum of light and shadow. And there can just be different vibrations, different experiences, different synchronicities based on where we are. And I just think that there's a lot of talk about forgiveness, which is beautiful. But there's such an easier, simpler step by just what you've stated with acceptance.
Well, once there's acceptance, what else is there? Any illusion of a journey or crossing a bridge is over. If there's one sin, and I feel there really is only one, that's that the idea of separation. Because we're separated from everything, which includes ourselves, which is odd. And I don't know what it is about that simple idea that people don't understand. You know, it depends on how one faces darkness. Even the name Lucifer, that is literally bright shining morning star, sitting in eternal darkness, not being concerned because he can see in the darkness. And we all have the same ability if we just let it all go. When I realized my dad was one of my greatest teachers that set me on the journey that I went, I had no animosity towards him at all. Absolute peace. And there was no forgiveness even involved. Because I understood in that moment he was in more pain than he ever put me in. You know, and if we can look through eyes like that, we see the world different. Buddha said, when you are awake, life is amazing. I feel I understand that, as I think you do as well. It is. Besides, what else are you going to do?
Well, when we think about some of these situations that are taking place, I think the latest was a news reporter or a gentleman that killed 2 other news reporters, and you know, or the gentleman that shot the police person in the back in Texas, I believe. Yes. When we look at those situations, the mind wants to go, these are evil, horrible people. Something should be done to them. What we're not realizing in that moment is if our thought goes there, then you are no different. You are being that very same person.
Yeah.
But if we can do what you've just said and step into that person's shoes, step into that person's mind and heart, and think about what degree of pain did that individual go through and have to get to do that type of behavior. It doesn't say that the behavior was appropriate, but it brings understanding. And I think understanding brings forgiveness or acceptance, one or the other. And as a humanity, if we can find our own humanity in those places, or at least the other person's humanity in those places, that's how 6 million people can change a world of 6 billion.
Yes, indeed. But again, to myself, if you have presence and clarity, there's a metaphor behind everything we're witnessing in the world. If you look through the eyes of judgment, like most of us are going to do, you're correct. They're identifying. They're no different than the shooter. But if we really look at the message that we're getting, do you remember that huge earthquake that produced that big tsunami in Phuket? Did you know most of those people, 250,000 that lost their lives, were children? And when you look at the people that are being shot and killed, here's what the metaphor, to me, is what I see. The tsunami was a message from the universe saying, people wake up, your innocence is being taken from you.
Yes, yes.
And with all of these shootings and the recent ones from the church in Charleston, to the 2 reporters, the police officer, that to me is a message now that the universe is saying your innocence is being destroyed, not taken from you anymore. It is being destroyed. And part of what you've come to realize is you still, through everything that you've been through, have that wonderful level of innocence. As do I. And I do feel mostly that most people that walk this path, whatever that means, have the same thing. So they aren't giving up their innocence. But if you look through the eyes of the innocent aspect, any of us can see what the messages that are going on out there, whether it's humans, interactions with human or Mother Nature. I mean, I heard on the meteorologists were saying that we have the Godzilla of El Niños forming in the Pacific, something they've never seen, the size. That's going to affect our weather on this part of the country and in the South to the likes we've never seen. And I think the metaphorical message is still the same idea.
Right.
All right. And the other thing is when we look at the world today, Simran, we see things that defy our comprehension, whether it's earthquakes, forest fires, conflict. But the thing that we don't recognize is every time our comprehension is defied, it is actually being expanded. So the universe is up to something. And I think it's to bring into life this very conversation.
I agree with you on that. And when I think about the shooters or the people being shot or people in relationship where there's adultery or situations where children are being affected through different types of abuse, in a very deep, broad perspective, if someone is willing to look at it, all those actions were being done from that person's innocence, meaning they were coming from a place that this was all they could be. They could innocently only be this because of where they came from. And it's how deeply are we willing to find the level of compassion, to find the level of understanding, rather than so quickly going to the place of intolerance?
Well, I think that's also one of those things that's going through those 3 stages of truth. And I also feel that that's in level 2 now as well. You know, Simran, when us humans learn to realize anything in life is just simply and comically stated, but in truth, is just a matter of changing your mind. changing the idea of how you judge things to be. See, that's that judgment idea again. That's where it creates the blindness and the deafness. That's why so many great masters have said, don't judge. When we judge that other human that pulled the trigger as a horrible person, we just judged ourselves. Except what we did was just verbally. You know, we don't know what was going through that person at that time. And I love how you say that. It's just coming from that innocence. If you are raised in violence, all you know is violence.
Right.
And from that perspective, you would still be innocent because that's all you know. And we don't have to be on automatic pilot like that. We really don't. We all can think independently. We know that. But we can also be one cause at the same time. And that's the amazing thing about life to me, that we can come together. Humans are amazing. When it comes to things like floods, people really band together. When you look at the event that happened in Charleston with those people at the church, look how the city came together.
Right.
All right. And then you look at like what happened in Ferguson. They didn't come together. Yeah, they did, but they came together in violence. So you see, we have those simple choices. And here's the other interesting thing. We can have those same choices internally. And that's where the work is done. When you do that work internally and learn to master your choices, then you become the greatest thing that you can be. I think Marianne Williamson said it the best. She said that she felt that we were more afraid of how small we are as opposed to how great we are. What I was going to share is during natural disasters. I remember years ago, our city flooded. And there were people out there sandbagging in suits, dresses, skirts, and heels. There were police officers, judges, prisoners, and all working in unison. And just as soon as the flood went away, they all went back to the small side again. So it takes things like conflict even to bring us all together.
Yeah.
Or great natural disasters to do that. Maybe one of these days we'll get it. Maybe one of these days.
When you talk about the mind, it just takes a matter of us changing the mind and going back within. It really is as simple as taking a breath and turning the page. Mm-hmm. And again, that inhale is going back within so that when you exhale, whatever you're going to do back out, you at least have an opportunity to tap into this lower body. Otherwise, if we're holding our breath and just acting, we've never gone below this place. And that's where a lot of these actions are coming from when they're happening, or the reactions to the actions are coming from not taking the breath, not dropping down into the body, not taking a moment to be present behind the eyes. The very things we've talked about.
Do you know that every inhale is feminine and every exhale is masculine?
I did not know that.
Yes, ma'am. It's everywhere. It's a feminine and masculine idea. You know, if I had to pick one thing that seems to be dominant in consciousness right now, is rage. Anger and rage. But nobody is attempting to address it within themselves. And the best thing to do, if people want to help society, why not realize the rage and not be a participant of it? If the theory of 100 monkeys holds water, then that means it can affect you if you allow it. But why not be that one enlightened human and unknowingly affecting a million, bathing them in love and compassion and bathing them in the idea of accepting themselves? I think that would be huge.
Yes.
Because that would change everything in our reality. And by the way, ancient prophecies tell us that we're going to come to this state. And so far, they have been correct, which means to me, the rest of them are also going to be correct, which is going to put us in that third stage of truth. because that's what ancient prophecy says is going to live here. In fact, one of them right off the top of my head says the yellow race will rule. Now, a lot of people think that's China. Really? Take a look at what's going on. You've got Tiger Woods, his dad is African, his mom is Thai. He married a Swede and has 2 children. What they're talking about is the golden people,
Yes.
one race. We're seeing Hindis marrying Caucasians, just all, and they're just starting to blend all over the world. All right. When we realize all of that, maybe will be easier for us to accept ourselves. If you saw yourself as a divine creature, wouldn't it be easy to accept?
That's it. That's it. Well, and you know, that really, if people can allow themselves to see that all of these situations around racism are happening to bring that acceptance to the fore, so that as all of this, I mean, if you look at, you know, the marriages, the transgender, the gay marriages now that can take place, the mixed marriages that you're talking about, it is about that blending. It is about that acceptance. There can't be racism in this world anymore. We're well past that. But the mind has to get past that. And that's probably why a lot of these situations are rising up, for us to have the wherewithal to say we're not going to buy into that anymore.
You know what's really funny about what you just said, the mind? Every individual has a mind, and they don't have to think about it in the way that they do. The mind is a simple thing to change and to shift. We all know what the thought is before it ever concludes, and that's when you shift it. Well, look at that person over there. Look at that human over there. Look at that being over there. Look at that great creature over there, even though they're holding a gun. No, just kidding with that one. The mind is the simplest thing to change. Share something with you. I was born and raised in Virginia, the South. And I can remember when African Americans had to step off of the sidewalk if Caucasians were going by and stand in the gutter. And I always thought as a kid, that is strange. And then my dad, I remember a water fountain that said blacks only, and I thought they must have special water. So I went over and took a drink, and boy, was my dad ticked. Long story short, I'm walking through base camp in South Vietnam with one of my team members, an African from East Philly. And somebody was flying a Confederate flag over a hooch, and he was telling me about what it meant. And I looked at him and says, well, why don't you climb up there and take it down? He goes, are you kidding me? Do you see the color of my skin? And I looked at him and said, no. I said, you want me to do it? He said, yeah. I climbed up on the top, cut that Confederate flag down, and burned it right in front of him. And almost every African in my base camp became an overnight friend. And I can remember him saying to the other Africans, do you know what this means? Do you see what's happening in the world? That this guy did that, so it didn't disturb me? And man, I'm telling you, I would have never thought. But see, I wasn't raised as a Hindi. I've lived there. I wasn't raised as an African. So I can only imagine that experience, but I'm not going to judge it. No,
Right.
Won't do it.
Well, and what you said goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, because he then said to the other African Americans, did you see? And so all of a sudden their sight now perceived in a different way. And that's the thing that has to take place now.
It's taking place.
It's what are you willing to see? Are you willing to believe in that past old outmoded idea? Are you willing to carry that forward into the future? Or are you willing to see what's really happening in the world? The truth that really exists in the world, not the illusion of this one incident or this incident, but what is the overall truth of the world today?
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to see the whole. If you do not see the whole, the individual points don't matter. You see, even on this screen that I'm looking at, I know logically I'm looking at pixels, okay, that are putting the whole image together. But what I'm seeing is the image of Simran. That's what I'm seeing, but not all the pixels. I'm seeing the whole. I'm not seeing the parts. And if we learn to give up the illusion of separation, we would see the whole. We would see the collective. And at that moment, in the blink of an eye, it could indeed all change. By the way, almost every single ancient prophecy that I've ever read says that the world will end up being peaceful, loving, and compassionate. Well, I guess this is part of that journey. When you look at your individual life, didn't your individual life reflect the outer world? Mine did as well, but at a much younger age. It reflects today's state of humanity. All right, if you and I walked that path, whatever that means, and we came to the level of knowledge that we have, doesn't that mean that the rest of the world is just doing the same thing? They haven't gone, oh, you know what? I don't need to do this. I'd rather go in that white and dark, like you said earlier. And that's just a simple choice. I remember the day, I think it was Kyle, he looked at me and he goes, do you like your life? And I said, no, master, I don't. He laughed, slapped his knee and says, well, change your mind. I thought, yeah, right, boss. Well, ultimately, that's what happened.
Wow.
Just like with you.
And that's, I mean, that simple statement right there says it all. I told you we would have a wonderful conversation today with Stephen Hairfield. It's always deep and profound and beautiful. And I'm always just grateful, deeply grateful to have time with you, Stephen. Definitely connect with him at stephenhairfield.com. He is an amazing counselor and coach, an incredible writer. You can check out his books and all of the different things that he has at his website. The links are below. And I look forward to having some more conversations in the future. Go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to say, let's make it an eternal conversation.
That's right. An eternal conversation.
Yeah.
As you look out in the world and you see everything that's happening, especially the most violent of things, what if that individual and that particular act was committed to save your life? It was there to show you something that would actually take you to a higher place. Can you take that in? Can you really take it in? I'm Simran on the Rebel Road, in love, of love, with love and as love, with my special friend and guest, Stephen Hairfield. See you next time.
Always. Thank you. It's a pleasure, Simran.